I never imagined the sound of a door would be enough to ruin my life. It was last Friday evening. I came home a little later than usual, figuring I'd surprise Lauren with dinner. Nothing fancy, just some takeout from her favorite sushi place. I walked in, and the house was eerily quiet, too quiet, considering the kids were staying at their grandparents'. I called out her name once, twice, nothing. I wasn't worried, though. Maybe she was in the shower or out for a walk. But as I set the bags down, that's when I heard it, a door closing. Soft, almost hesitant, like someone trying to avoid being heard. It came from upstairs. The kind of sound that, if you weren't really paying attention, you could easily dismiss. But I was paying attention. I froze for a second, listening. You know how they say when something feels wrong, your body just knows before your brain catches up? That was me, standing there in the middle of my kitchen, suddenly on high alert. Slowly, I made my way upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I told myself I was being stupid. I mean, this is my house. Lauren's home. What could possibly be wrong? But that sound, it kept echoing in my mind. The door was cracked open just enough to show a sliver of our bedroom. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and pushed it open the rest of the way. And there she was. Standing at the window, back to me, wearing that black dress I hadn't seen in years. The one she wore on our anniversary dinner 5 years ago. The one I thought she had thrown out. She wasn't alone. I didn't recognize him at first, not until he turned slightly, his face half hidden by shadows, but enough that I knew. It was him. My best friend, Matt. And that's when everything stopped making sense. I stood there, frozen. Not in the way you see in the movies, where the guy collapses or yells out in agony. No, it wasn't like that. My feet felt like they were bolted to the ground, and the room seemed to shrink around me. My eyes were locked on Lauren, my wife of over a decade, standing there with Matt, my best friend since college. They didn't see me at first. She was whispering something to him, her voice so low I couldn't catch the words, but the look on her face, that was clear as day. She wasn't angry, wasn't upset. It was soft, almost comforting. And he had the smirk on his face like he had just pulled off some great trick, some joke only the two of them were in on. They were standing too close. Too goddamn close. And then Matt noticed me. He didn't jump, didn't panic. He just froze for a moment, his expression shifting slightly, like he wasn't quite sure how to react. It was Lauren who spun around, eyes wide, her hand flying to her mouth. There was a brief silence, just a few seconds, but in that instant, everything clicked into place. The late night she had blamed on work, the extra effort she'd put into her appearance when she said she was meeting clients, the subtle changes in her behavior that I had been too blind, or maybe too trusting, to question. Brian, it's not. Don't, I said, cutting her off before she could start with the excuses. I didn't need to hear them. Whatever bullshit story she had lined up wouldn't change the fact that they were standing here, alone, in our bedroom. Matt, still holding his position like some goddamn statue, opened his mouth. Look, man, I can explain. Explain what? I shot back, my voice finally finding some strength. I took a step forward, and just like that, the paralysis broke. Explain why you're here. In my house? With my wife? What the fuck are you going to explain, Matt? His face tightened, that cocky grin now gone, replaced with something closer to fear. He tried to take a step back, but there wasn't much room between him and the wall. Lauren jumped in. Brian, please, it's not what it looks like. You're misunderstanding. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because this was her plan. This was the best she could come up with. Misunderstanding? Really? I pointed at the bed. Go on, then. Help me understand what I'm seeing right now. Enlighten me. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words died on her lips. Matt, to his credit, had at least the decency to stay silent. He wasn't stupid enough to try to twist the situation any more than it already was. I don't know how long we stood like that, me glaring at them frozen in their guilt. Time stretched out in the strangest way, but in my head, I was already running through the moments. The pieces were falling into place, the text messages I hadn't thought to check, the random excuses for leaving the house at weird hours. Matt's sudden appearances at times when I hadn't even invited him over. The occasional looks between them that I had shrugged off as nothing. All those moments I had chosen to ignore. I wasn't going to ignore this. I don't even know what to say to either of you right now, I finally managed. You were my best friend, Matt. My best friend. And you, I said, turning to Lauren, my voice breaking slightly, you're my wife. What the fuck happened to you? Lauren stepped toward me, her hand reaching out, but I moved back before she could touch me. Brian, please. It didn't go that far, okay? We didn't. I cut her off again. Don't insult me with that "we didn't go that far" crap. You're standing here, alone with him, in my house. In our bedroom. Don't even try to act like this is innocent. I pointed at Matt. How long? She hesitated. How long, Lauren? I repeated, my voice rising, demanding the truth I already knew would crush me. Her eyes flickered toward Matt, just for a second, but it was enough to set me off again. Don't look at him. I'm asking you. A few months, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It started a few months ago. A few months. A few fucking months. They'd been sneaking around behind my back for months, and I hadn't even seen it. I wanted to throw something, hit something, anything to stop the rage building up inside me from exploding. Months. I repeated it, trying to wrap my head around it. It wasn't just one mistake, some moment of weakness. This was deliberate. Calculated. This had been going on for months, and I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. Brian, please. It didn't mean anything, I swear. It happened, and I didn't know how to stop it. I laughed again, but this time it was bitter, cold. Didn't mean anything? You expect me to believe that? You're standing here, with him, in my fucking house, and you want me to believe this didn't mean anything? Matt finally spoke, his voice low. Look, Brian, it wasn't supposed to go this way. Things got out of hand, man. Out of hand? I repeated, stepping closer to him now, my fists clenched at my sides. You've been fucking my wife for months, and you think this just got out of hand? He looked like he wanted to say something more, but he wisely kept his mouth shut. I turned back to Lauren, who was now on the verge of tears. She was trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks forming. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could just keep going, sneaking around behind my back like this? She shook her head. No, Brian, I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I had heard enough. I walked over to the bed, grabbed my keys from the nightstand, and started to head for the door. I needed to get out of there before I did something I would regret. Where are you going? She called after me, panic creeping into her voice. I need to think, I said, without turning around. I need to think about what the hell I'm going to do. I stormed out of the room and down the stairs, not bothering to look back. I slammed the front door behind me and got into my car. For a few minutes, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The anger, the disbelief, the betrayal, it all crashed down on me at once, suffocating me. I couldn't believe this was happening. Not Lauren. Not Matt. This wasn't supposed to be my life. This kind of shit happens to other people, not to me. But it was real. And it was happening. And now, I had to figure out how to deal with it. I drove around for hours that night, just trying to calm the storm that was raging inside me. I didn't even know where I was going, or if I was going anywhere at all. I just needed to keep moving, to stop myself from turning the car around, going back to the house, and tearing Matt apart. The audacity of it, of both of them, sickened me. That was my wife, in my house, standing there like she didn't even care that she got caught. Matt, the guy who had been by my side for years, had this look on his face like he had gotten away with it for so long that maybe, just maybe, I'd let him off with a warning. There was no warning. No second chances. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. At some point, I pulled into an empty parking lot, killed the engine, and just sat there. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, vibrating every few minutes with calls and texts from Lauren, but I didn't touch it. I wasn't ready to talk. Every time I thought about what I had seen her and Matt standing there, so casual, so comfortable, it was like a fresh wave of nausea hit me. The worst part? I still didn't know the full story. How deep this went. What else had they done behind my back? And I knew I wasn't going to be able to rest until I had all the details. I don't know how long I stayed in that parking lot, but it must have been a while because, by the time I started driving again, the streets were practically empty. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I knew I couldn't run from this forever. I had to go back. I had to face them. So I headed home, my hands gripping the wheel tight, my mind racing with every possible confrontation scenario. When I got back to the house, the lights were still on. I figured Matt had left by now, but as soon as I walked in, I realized that wasn't the case. There he was, sitting on my couch like it was any other night, like we were just going to have a beer and watch the game or something. Lauren was standing by the kitchen counter, eyes red from crying, looking like she didn't know what to do with herself. "Where the fuck have you been, man?" Matt said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in his voice. "We need to talk." "Yeah, we fucking do," I replied, walking over to him, every step feeling heavier than the last. "But first, you need to get the fuck out of my house." He raised his hands in this mock surrender, trying to defuse the situation, but it only pissed me off more. "Brian, come on, let's not do this. We need to sort this out." I didn't give him the chance to finish his sentence. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and pulled him off the couch, shoving him toward the door. "Get out." "Brian, please." Lauren's voice cracked as she stepped toward me, but I wasn't in the mood to hear her beg. "I'm not going to say it again," I growled, glaring at Matt. "You don't belong here. Not anymore." He stood there for a second, like he was weighing his options, but he wasn't stupid enough to push me further. He nodded, glanced at Lauren, and headed for the door. I watched him go, not taking my eyes off him until I heard the front door close behind him. And then it was just me and her. The silence hung between us like a dead weight. Lauren stood there, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't going to let her control this conversation. I wasn't going to let her lead it into some bullshit sob story. "Sit down," I said, my voice low, but firm. She hesitated for a moment, then moved slowly to the dining table, sitting down like she was bracing for impact. I stayed standing, looming over her, because I couldn't bring myself to sit next to her. Not now. Not after what I'd seen. I needed to keep some distance between us. So, I began, crossing my arms. "How long?" She didn't look up at me, just stared down at her hands like a guilty kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. "I already told you," she whispered. "A few months." "That's not good enough," I snapped. "I need details. I need the truth. All of it." She flinched, finally looking up at me, tears welling up in her eyes again. "Brian, please. Don't fucking Brian, please me," I shouted, slamming my fist on the table. "You owe me the truth, Lauren. How long has this been going on?" She broke then, the tears streaming down her face as she started sobbing, shaking her head like she couldn't believe this was happening. "I'm so sorry," she choked out between sobs. "It was a mistake, I swear. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Bullshit," I spat. "You don't accidentally fuck someone for months. You don't accidentally sneak around behind your husband's back. How long, Lauren? How fucking long?" She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, sniffling. 6 months, she said, barely audible. 6 months. Half a year. They'd been screwing around for 6 goddamn months, and I'd been none the wiser. I felt the anger rising again, the urge to throw something, to break something. But I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to stay focused. When? I asked, my voice cold now. When did it start? She hesitated, then sighed. Last summer. At that barbecue we had, remember? You and Matt were drinking, and we just started talking. It wasn't anything serious at first. Just harmless flirting. Harmless flirting, I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So when did the harmless flirting turn into fucking? She flinched again, like the word physically hurt her. A few weeks later. You had that work trip. He came over to help with the kids. I could feel the bile rising in my throat. The kids were here? I asked, my voice dangerously low. They were asleep, she whispered, unable to meet my gaze. I slammed my fist on the table again, harder this time, making her jump. You brought him into my house. Into my bed. While our kids were here. You disgust me. Her sobbing got louder, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her tears make me feel guilty. Not this time. Did you ever stop to think about what this would do to me? To them? I demanded, leaning over the table, forcing her to look at me. Did you ever stop to think, Lauren? Or did you just not care? She shook her head frantically, her hands clutching her hair as she cried harder. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't. Of course, you didn't, I said, cutting her off. You didn't think about anything but yourself. You didn't think about what this would do to our family. She broke down completely then, her body shaking with sobs as she buried her face in her hands. I wanted to feel something: anger, hatred, disgust, but all I felt was empty. Numb. Like the part of me that cared had been ripped out and thrown away. I want to know one thing, I said after a long pause. Why? She looked up at me, her face twisted in pain. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't happy. I thought maybe he. I don't know. I was stupid. It didn't mean anything, I swear. Didn't mean anything, I repeated, shaking my head. 6 months of lies, sneaking around, fucking him behind my back. But it didn't mean anything. She tried to reach out to me, but I pulled away before her hand could touch mine. Please, Brian, she sobbed. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. Please. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't sure if I ever could. I don't know what's going to happen, I said, my voice flat. But right now, I need space. I need to figure out what the hell I'm going to do. I turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving her crying at the table. As I made my way up to the guest room, I realized something: no matter what happens next, nothing will ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. Lying on the guest room bed, the ceiling seemed too close, the walls too tight, and my mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Lauren and Matt. Over and over again, like a movie on repeat. I didn't even know where to begin processing this. What do you do when your best friend and your wife betray you at the same time? When your entire world comes crashing down in a matter of minutes? I couldn't just walk away. Not like this. She had to feel it, really feel it. This wasn't going to be something she cried over for a few days and then brushed under the rug. No, she needed to understand what she had destroyed, and she needed to suffer for it. I sat up, rubbed my hands over my face, and decided what had to be done. This wasn't going to be one of those situations where I let it slide or let her apologize her way out of it. I wasn't the kind of guy to just walk away from a problem like that. No. I'd be the guy who'd make sure she knew exactly what she had lost. And as for Matt? He wasn't getting off easy either. The first thing I needed to do was get my head straight. I wasn't going to storm out, flipping tables and screaming like an idiot. No, I had to play this smart, precise. That's what made it worse for her, that it wouldn't just be some blow-up fight. It'd be methodical. Cold. Calculated. Something she couldn't see coming. Something that would leave her wondering if I had been planning this all along. I got up, grabbed my phone, and sent a single text to Tom, my closest friend who wasn't Matt. We'd known each other for over 20 years, and I trusted him like a brother. I need a favor. I'll explain later. Can you meet me tomorrow? Within minutes, I got a response, of course. You okay? I stared at the screen, considering the question for a moment, then typed back, not even close. The next morning, I left the house early before Lauren had even stirred. I couldn't look at her, couldn't deal with her apologies or tears. I knew what she'd say, more of the same. She was sorry. It didn't mean anything. She was stupid. She didn't know why she did it. The same garbage I'd heard the night before. I wasn't interested in any of that. She'd already said enough. I met Tom at a coffee shop downtown. He looked worried when he saw me, but I didn't give him time to ask questions. I told him everything, the affair, the lies, the way I found out. His face turned from shock to rage, and for a second, I thought he was about to drive over to Matt's place and kick his ass right then and there. But I told him to wait. No, I said, shaking my head. We're not doing that. We're going to be smarter about this. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. What do you want to do? I took a deep breath and told him my plan. The first part was simple. I needed to get all my assets in order. I wasn't going to let her blindside me with divorce proceedings where she walked away with half of everything. I wanted the house, the car, the savings, everything. I wasn't about to lose the life I'd built because she decided to screw around with my best friend. I spent the rest of the day meeting with a lawyer, laying out everything. Fortunately, I had kept track of our finances meticulously over the years, so I knew where every dollar was, what was in both our names, and what I could legally protect. The lawyer nodded approvingly as I laid it all out, and we discussed my options. It was clear I could push for the lion's share of everything, especially considering the circumstances. By the time I walked out of the lawyer's office, I felt a strange sense of control. This wasn't going to be a situation where I was helpless or blindsided. I was going to hit her where it hurt most. The next step was a little more personal. That afternoon, I gathered everything I could find: emails, texts, any signs of her infidelity that might have been stored in her phone or computer. With a bit of help from Tom, and some tech skills he picked up working in IT, we were able to pull up deleted messages between her and Matt. They'd been smart, using apps where messages disappeared, but some things still slipped through the cracks: old texts, shared photos. It was disgusting. Seeing the way they talked to each other, how casual it had all become. What got me most was the way they laughed about it, like it was some inside joke between them, knowing I was completely in the dark. That was what pushed me over the edge. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was the mocking, the complete disregard for me. I printed everything. Pages upon pages of messages, photos, and call logs. I put them all in a neat stack, and that night, after Lauren had gone to bed, I left them in her office with a single note on top. Here's everything you destroyed. Enjoy. I didn't stay in the house after that. I didn't want to be there when she found the stack of evidence. I knew what would happen: tears, panic, maybe even anger. She'd probably try to explain it away, or worse, deny everything despite the proof right in front of her face. I wasn't interested in seeing any of that. Instead, I stayed at Tom's place for a few days, keeping my distance while she unraveled. And from what I heard, unravel she did. On the third day, she started blowing up my phone with messages, long, rambling paragraphs about how sorry she was, how she would do anything to make things right. She begged me to come home, begged me to give her another chance. But I wasn't biting. The damage was done. There was no going back, no fixing what had been shattered. But I wasn't done yet. Matt was next. I hadn't confronted him directly since that night in my house, but I knew it was only a matter of time before I had to deal with him. He had been lying low, probably hoping I would just cool off and let it blow over. Maybe he thought I'd forgive him eventually, that we could somehow move past this. He was dead wrong. I sent him a simple text, "Meet me at the bar. 8 p.m. He showed up, probably thinking I was ready to talk things out, maybe even apologize for how I reacted. He couldn't have been more mistaken. When he walked in, I didn't even look up at him. I stayed seated at the bar, nursing a beer, waiting for him to come to me. "Brian," he started, sitting down next to me, "man, I've been waiting to talk. I know things got out of hand, but..." "Shut up," I interrupted, my voice low and cold. He blinked, surprised, but kept his mouth shut. "You think we're going to talk this out?" I asked, turning to face him. "You think I'm going to sit here and listen to you explain why you thought it was okay to fuck my wife?" He flinched at the bluntness of my words but didn't respond. He didn't have to. "You're not walking away from this," I said. "You're going to pay for what you did." "Brian, come on," he started, his voice shaky. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you." "Save it," I snapped. "I don't give a damn what it meant to you. You crossed a line, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." He sat there, wide-eyed, clearly not expecting me to be this cold. I could see the fear starting to creep in, but I didn't care. He deserved worse. I tossed a folder onto the bar between us. Inside was everything I had gathered, copies of the texts, the photos, all the proof of what he and Lauren had been doing behind my back. His eyes widened as he flipped through it, his face going pale. "That's going to HR at your office," I said calmly. "You're going to lose your job, and everyone's going to know exactly what you did." "Brian, please," he begged, his voice trembling now. "You don't have to do this. We can work this out. I'll do anything. Please don't ruin my life." I stood up, throwing a few bills onto the bar to cover my drink. "Too late. You ruined mine first." And with that, I walked out, leaving him sitting there, holding the evidence of his own destruction in his hands. When I got back to the house that night, Lauren was waiting for me. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes were puffy, her hair a mess, and she was still wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago. I could see the stack of papers I had left her sitting on the coffee table, untouched. "Brian, we need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "No, we don't," I replied, walking past her toward the stairs. "There's nothing left to talk about." I didn't give her a chance to respond before heading up to the guest room, closing the door behind me. I wasn't going to let her drag this out any longer. She'd made her choices, and now she was going to live with them. I didn't avoid Lauren entirely after that night, though I wanted to. Over the next few days, she tried to approach me a few times, but each attempt felt like watching someone beg for their life at the last minute, knowing the execution was already set. It was pitiful, almost beneath her, this woman who, only a week ago, had managed to carry on an affair for 6 months right under my nose, now reduced to a crying mess. I was done letting her control the situation. Done letting her dictate the terms. But she wouldn't let go. Every night, I'd come home to find her trying to make some kind of effort, like she thought we could just snap back to normal life. One night it was dinner, a meal I used to love, set out on the dining room table as if that could erase the past. Another time, she made sure the house was spotless, the kids' toys tucked away, everything perfectly organized, like we lived in a magazine spread. She was pretending this was some sitcom misunderstanding that could be resolved with a heart-to-heart and a few tears. It wasn't. One morning, I came downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen table, staring into her cup of coffee like she was waiting for it to give her answers. She didn't look up when I entered. She must have heard my footsteps, though, because she spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't keep doing this, Brian." I didn't answer right away, just grabbed my keys from the counter and started toward the door. But she wasn't done. "Please," she said, her voice louder now, more desperate. "Can we just talk? Really talk?" I stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "What's there left to say, Lauren? You had 6 months to talk to me. Now you want to have a conversation?" Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood up, and I could hear her footsteps as she walked closer. I don't want to lose you, she said, her voice trembling. I made a mistake. I know that. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, can't we at least try to fix this? For the kids? For us? Her words barely registered with me anymore. It was the same speech I'd heard from her multiple times now, how she was sorry, how she wanted to fix things, how she didn't want to lose our life together. But that life was already gone, and I wasn't sure how to make her see that. I turned around slowly, my eyes locking with hers. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were trembling, clutching the front of her shirt as if she was physically holding herself together. You want to talk? I said, my voice cold. Fine. Let's talk. But this time, it's going to be the truth. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I gestured toward the living room. Sit down. She hesitated but then walked over to the couch and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing, leaning against the doorway, keeping my distance. I didn't want to sit next to her. I didn't want to give her any comfort. You say you want to fix this, I began, my eyes never leaving hers. But you still haven't told me the truth, have you? You haven't told me everything. You haven't even told me why. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. Don't give me the same bullshit about not knowing why it happened or that it didn't mean anything. It meant something. It meant enough for you to sneak around for half a year. So, let's start there. Why, Lauren? Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might start crying again. But she held it together, taking a deep breath before she spoke. I don't know, she whispered. I wasn't thinking. I was lonely. I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped me. Lonely? You were lonely, so you started fucking Matt? Really? It's not like that, she said quickly, her voice shaky. God, I don't even know how to explain it. It wasn't about him, Brian. It wasn't about Matt. Could have fooled me, I shot back. You've been meeting him behind my back for 6 months. It sure as hell looks like it was about him. She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes again. No, it wasn't. I swear. It just happened. I didn't want it to go this far. I didn't plan for it to happen. I pushed myself off the doorframe and walked toward her, my anger boiling over. So, what was it, then? Some fling to pass the time? Some little fantasy to make you feel better about your lonely life? She flinched but didn't answer. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. You had everything, Lauren. A family. A husband who loved you. And you threw it all away for what? For him? For Matt? She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I don't know why I did it. I'm so sorry. I stood there, watching her, feeling a mixture of disgust and pity. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. That person was gone, replaced by this broken shell sitting in front of me. I want to know one thing, I said after a long pause. If I hadn't walked in that night, would you have stopped? Or would you have kept going? She didn't answer right away, just sat there, her hands still covering her face. Tell me the truth, Lauren, I demanded. If I hadn't caught you, would this still be going on? She slowly lowered her hands, wiping the tears from her cheeks. I don't know, she whispered. You don't know? I repeated, my voice rising. You don't know if you would have kept fucking him behind my back? You don't know? She shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her face. I wasn't thinking. I was in a bad place. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You sure as hell succeeded in that. She broke down again, her sobs echoing through the quiet house. I felt nothing. Not sympathy, not anger. Just cold, empty detachment. After what felt like hours, she finally spoke again, her voice barely audible. What are we going to do? I sighed, leaning against the wall, crossing my arms. I don't know yet. I've already talked to a lawyer. There are options, but it's not something I'm going to rush into. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Brian, please. We don't have to go that far. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. Stop, I said firmly. Stop pretending like this can be fixed with a few therapy sessions or a couple of apologies. This is bigger than that. You didn't just make a mistake, Lauren. You made a choice. Over and over again. For 6 months. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off again. I'm not saying I've decided on divorce, but I'm not ruling it out either. I need time to figure out what I want. And right now, I'm not even sure I want to be in the same room as you. Her shoulders slumped, and she wiped at her tears again. I understand, she whispered. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. I stared at her for a long moment, taking in the sight of the woman I had once loved more than anything, now reduced to a sobbing wreck. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was going to be okay. But that part of me was buried under layers of betrayal and anger. There was no easy fix for this. There was no going back to how things were. I don't want to lose our family either, I said quietly. But that's exactly what you've done. You broke it. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Brian, please. Just give me a chance to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I'm not making any promises. I need time to think. Time to process all of this. She nodded, wiping at her tears again. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just, please, don't give up on us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to tell her what I was really thinking, that maybe, just maybe, there wasn't an us anymore. Without another word, I turned and headed for the door. As I walked out, I heard her sobs start up again, echoing through the house. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Not this time. The days that followed were a blur. Every time I saw Lauren, it was the same, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her voice shaky, begging me to give her another chance. But I had nothing left to give. My mind was a battlefield, constantly waging war with itself. Part of me wanted to walk away, to burn every bridge, to erase every memory of her. But the other part, the part that still clung to the years we had spent together, the family we built, wasn't ready to let go just yet. I couldn't avoid making a decision forever, though. We couldn't keep living like this. The tension in the house was suffocating. Even the kids, oblivious as they were to the details, could sense that something wasn't right. I hated that I was dragging them through this. Hated that their innocent little lives were being ripped apart by something they didn't understand. But how could I pretend anymore? How could I fake it for their sake when I couldn't even look at Lauren without feeling sick? I spent more time out of the house than in it, crashing at Tom's place, pretending to be working late or helping out a friend when the truth was I just couldn't stand to be home. Every time I walked through the front door, the memories of what had happened slammed into me, suffocating me, drowning me in rage and betrayal. There was no escape from it, no break from the constant reminder that the woman I had loved, trusted, shared my life with had thrown it all away for 6 months of lies. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It was who she cheated with. Matt. A guy I had trusted with everything. My best friend. The one person outside of my family I would have never suspected. That made it worse somehow, the fact that the betrayal wasn't just from her, it was from him too. They had turned my life into a joke, playing me for a fool, laughing behind my back. And I'd been too blind to see it. Too trusting. Too stupid. I couldn't live with that feeling anymore. The anger, the hurt, it was eating me alive. I had to make a decision, and soon, before it consumed me completely. One evening, about 2 weeks after I had found out, I came home to find Lauren sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, though it was clear she wasn't actually watching it. She looked up when I walked in, and for the first time in days, she didn't say anything. No begging, no pleading. Just silence. I dropped my keys on the table and stood there, not moving, not speaking. The air between us felt thick, heavy, like we were both waiting for something to happen, for someone to say something that would break the stalemate. Finally, I spoke. "We need to talk." She nodded, her expression unreadable, and turned off the TV. "Okay." I sat down in the armchair across from her, keeping my distance. I wasn't ready to sit next to her, wasn't ready to feel that close again. I didn't know if I ever would be. "I've been thinking," I started, my voice calm, controlled. "And I've come to a decision." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue. "I can't live like this," I said, my voice steady. "This, whatever this is, it's not working. I can't move past what you did. I can't just forget it." She swallowed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Brian, Let me finish," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I've been trying to figure out if there's a way we can fix this, a way we can somehow move past it, but I don't see how that's possible. You broke my trust, Lauren. And once that's gone, there's no getting it back." Her lip trembled, but she didn't speak, just stared at me with those tear-filled eyes, waiting for the hammer to drop. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, finally letting the words out, and even though I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, it still hit me like a punch to the gut. Saying it out loud made it real. Final. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lauren stared at me, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the couch like she was trying to stop herself from falling apart. "You don't mean that," she whispered, shaking her head slowly. "You can't. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can." "No," I cut her off, my voice firm. "We can't fix this. You think some therapist is going to erase what you did? You think sitting in a room and talking about our feelings is going to change the fact that you spent 6 months lying to me? Cheating on me with my best friend?" "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Brian. Please, don't do this. Don't end us. I'll do anything, I swear. Just don't give up on us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I realized that I didn't feel anything anymore. The anger, the hurt, even the love, it was all gone. All that was left was a hollow shell, a void where our life together used to be. "I'm not giving up on us," I said quietly. "You did. The moment you decided to sleep with him, you gave up on us. You made that choice, Lauren. Not me." Her face crumpled, and the sobs I had been expecting finally broke free, shaking her entire body. She buried her face in her hands, crying so hard that it almost hurt to watch. Almost. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. This was the bed she had made, and now she had to lie in it. "I'll stay for the kids," I said, standing up, my voice detached, almost cold. "Until we figure out the details. But we're done." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her sobbing on the couch. I knew she'd beg, plead, try to convince me that there was still something worth saving, but I had already made my decision. And nothing she could say would change that. The next few days were spent in a blur of legal paperwork, meetings with lawyers, and figuring out how to tell the kids. That was the hardest part, explaining to them why their mom and dad weren't going to be living together anymore. I tried to keep it as simple as possible, telling them that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes mean they can't stay married. I didn't tell them the real reason, though. They didn't need to know the ugly truth. Not yet. Lauren didn't fight me on the divorce. I think she knew there was no point. We agreed on joint custody of the kids, splitting time between our house and an apartment she would move into once the paperwork was finalized. It was all very civil. And that pissed me off more than anything. The fact that we had been reduced to this, two people discussing the end of their marriage like we were negotiating a business deal. I moved into the guest room permanently while we waited for the divorce to go through. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than pretending everything was normal. At least this way, there was some distance between us, even if it was just a few feet. The nights were the worst, though. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell we had gotten here. Wondering if there had ever been a chance to stop this from happening, to prevent our entire life from falling apart. But every time I thought about it, the answer was always the same: no. This was inevitable. The moment she decided to sleep with Matt, our marriage had been over. It had just taken me a while to realize it. The day the divorce was finalized, Lauren moved out of the house. I came home from work to find her car gone, her things packed up. The house felt empty, like a part of it had been ripped out, leaving behind a gaping hole. I stood in the living room, staring at the spot where her things used to be, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just nothing. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it meant I was finally ready to move on. Or maybe it just meant I had nothing left to feel. In the end, what did I learn? That trust is fragile, and once it's broken, there's no putting it back together. That sometimes, the people you think you know best can betray you in the worst possible way. That love isn't enough to fix everything. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. That I could survive this, even when it felt like I couldn't. That I could rebuild my life, even after it was shattered. I don't know what's next for me. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone again, or if I'll ever want to. But I do know one thing: I'm done living in the past. I'm done letting the betrayal define me. It's time to move forward. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.